It's good to see so many of you here this morning on this bright day. I tell a story as I often do when I begin a sermon, and this one is no different. This one goes back all the way when I was 12 years old. As I stood before a temple in Mysore, India, I could feel an energy there that I can still feel today. It was actually a ruin of a temple, and it was dark and overgrown. The air was hot and humid, the smell of dung and incense thick enough to almost see. But all I could see from the doorway was a lonely holy man in the temple over a fire with a pot of rice. I hesitated as if some unknown force was holding me back. There was something very powerful within that dark space that I was both eager and afraid to see. I swallowed my fear. I stepped over the threshold into the dark space, and it took a few moments for my eyes to adjust to the darkness of an unlit ruin. It was no longer the home of Brahmins and bulls, but monkeys and mangrove leaves. But the carvings were quite impressive, carvings of Shiva and Ganesh and Sita and Rama, all staring down on me. I walked past the holy man, who didn't even raise an eye as he was looking down on his cauldron making his rice, and I went into the next room of the ruined temple. And I knew before I entered there that I had been there before. And I went into the next room, which I also knew I had seen before. I started to race through the rooms, feeling this combination of both joy and sadness. I knew each room as I turned the corner. And then, as if I was being pulled yet out of the ruin, I ran back out into the bright sunshine, hot, transformed. I ran up to my mother and I said, "I've been here before." "No, dear, you haven't." No, I'm sure I've been here before." And she looked at me and perhaps silently thought I needed psychiatric help. And perhaps I did. Entering that temple, the fire and darkness that moved me so much was later to confirm my later belief in reincarnation, which is a sermon for another day. But the foreknowledge was so strong that it led me ultimately into my calling in ministry. And I've been following that call to the religious life for all of my adult life. There was a heady optimism of my first business at a time in the 1980s when I thought solar energy was going to save the world. And I was in the Midwest starting a solar energy company, selling solar panels to pig farmers, pounding up and down the gravel roads, an evangelist for what I thought was the future. And I remember going into our first house, Francis and I in our first house, and that feeling of the craziness and the loveliness that was calling us to family. And then the worn marble of my first church. And then all the other churches. Anytime we step into a cauldron of a new experience, we are always being called back into something that happened to us before, even if we are not conscious of that. And I think we're in a time now of courage and hope and fear. And the question that lies before us is whether we're going to be able to take the courage and the hope and turn it to something that we can live with to undo the fear. I've been blessed, as I'm sure all of you have, by those moments of great transformation, those cauldrons in our lives. I believe that our entire ministry here at MLUC could be summed up in the phrase, compassionate transformation. My calling as your minister in this developmental ministry we have together is to call us into a hope that we may not easily see right now. We transform suffering into meaningful purpose, my friends, by the cauldron of our compassion that we show those who walk through our door and those communities that we serve beyond our door. It's work. It takes time. It's not something that just happens. It's not like an evangelistic aha moment. It happens to us as the heat of life keeps us moving and transforming. Our calling together is really quite simple. Transformation is something, I believe, something we all think we want, perhaps even need, but we really don't. Because the problem is that when you actually start transforming, you have to change the way you live, right? You have to change some of the things that are happening in your life in order to make room for the new things to happen in your life. I think a lot about this story of stone soup. Everyone was afraid of someone else, right? Suspicious of the stranger, enveloped in their own fears. For all we know, the government was making them disappear. Does this sound familiar? And then comes this stranger, this fire person, who sees the fear and sees the worry, the want, and asks only for a pot or a cauldron, some water, and a stone. The stone. The stone, of course, is really nothing, right? But then it's everything at the same time. Because as the stone cooks in the water, people are now curious by who would have faith to make stone soup in the middle of our village. And they bring what little they have, and they make it a stew. They take the cauldron of water that is boiling there with a stone in the center of it, and they add the ingredients of their own lives, and in so doing, they become transformed as a community. Do you understand what I'm saying here? We're being transformed by our community. You're bringing the gifts to the stone soup of this place. Fear transformed to community. Water transformed to food. What is holy in the story? Well, a great deal is holy in the story. I think the stranger, for one, is probably the most holy. The food that's produced is holy. The villagers themselves are holy. They are bringing all that to the project of transformation. But the cauldron, as a vessel of that which holds us, that is also holy. And the water that is boiling in it, that gift of water that makes us who we are, that helps to transform things, is also holy. But as one commentator said, perhaps the strangest of all is the stone itself, right? What's a stone? Stones all over the place. Buildings covered in stones. But a stone is more than just a stone. A stone is a symbol of that which is permanent in our lives, that which holds us to the ground on which we live. A stone is a powerful metaphor. Now, I don't know if I have my physics right, but I often believe that energy is always moving, right? And we're always just a collection of energy that's bouncing around and held in form together. That's what quantum physics teaches us. And so what if a stone and things that are so immovable as to appear dead and inert are actually energy vibrating at such a fast speed that they appear to be completely solid? Imagine the power that's inside of a stone as the metaphor for that which is the power that is inside of us. Stones like the stones of the ruined temple in Mysore, stones like the image of Shiva, the god of creation and destruction. Turning a stone into soup, turning fear into compassion. It's hard and it's dangerous work, but friends, we have at our disposal something quite powerful. And the power we have is the covenant which drives us together. That's that old word I talked about last time. Covenant is the cauldron which holds us. A covenant is a continuing story of transformation. This church has been here for decades. This church has been huge at one point. 750 adult members, 250 kids. That's why there's this classroom building behind you. And then there was a shrinkage, and now there's a growing again, but in a different way. It's not just about the numbers. Now it's about the community here. It's about all of you. You are the stones in the soup that are holding the pot down. A people so bold, as the song goes, opening the door to those who are different from yourselves, or maybe even more importantly, going out into the world to be with those who are different from ourselves, to be on the side of love, to stand with black lives and brown lives and queer lives and migrant lives and your lives. As we approach the 70th anniversary of this church, I invite you to consider what is happening here as something quite different than whatever happened in the past. This is not just about something you get, but something you give. Have we made mistakes? Yep. Mistakes will happen, as they say. Or during the Bush years, George W. Bush, mistakes were made. Okay. We make mistakes, right? We make mistakes. Mistakes happen all the time. That's the nature of being in a community, and that's also the nature of the Cauldron itself. We are being transformed through the mistakes and the successes, and it takes both. It's not an upward and onward journey forever, friends. Sometimes we step backwards, sometimes we stumble, sometimes we fall. And in the falling, we are also being transformed. Many of you come here on a Sunday or during the week, and you feel at home here. And I hear that metaphor often about home, and it's an important metaphor. But a home is also a place that opens its doors to people who are different. A religion in the shared faith in humanity, in the future, that even in times like this, these desperate times, with the president building a ballroom that's bigger than the entire White House, we are here to do something that has not been done before. And that is to truly transform not only our own lives, but the lives around us. And churches across, churches across our country, across our world, from Romania to the Philippines, have been doing the same thing for 500 years. A lot of people think we're some new age religion. We're in a new age, but we're not a new age religion. The power of hope and transformation is all around us. And when you enter here, you come here both as a homecoming and an outgoing. A homecoming and an outgoing. This is the place where, regardless of what you believe, you will find your home here, because this is where the home is. You come here to be fed spiritually and then to serve. And I see this happen all the time. I've seen it throughout the years that I've been doing this work. People will come, and sometimes they sit in the back row, and I'm not pointing anybody out because I don't have my glasses on. You're a Monet. But you're sitting back there, and maybe you're crying. Maybe you've been coming here every week for the last month or so, and you just cry. And I've had people tell me, oh, I don't know why I'm crying. I can tell you why you're crying. Because your heart is being opened. And usually folks who are brand new here, I say, listen, just come for a while. Get the vibe. Be with us. Eventually, you will feel the need to go out into the world and do something with this newfound faith, this beloved faith of ours, this transforming and welcoming faith. The world around us now is in tremendous need. I know it's exhausting. The exhausted majority, one political commentator called it. That's what we are. We're the exhausted majority. But remember that everyone in here comes there with their own story. And I always remember this when you were a newcomer here. And again, I'm not singling you out, but just letting you know that I see you. We see you. We know that you didn't just walk in here because you were bored on a Sunday. No? right? You walked in here because you need something. Because someone here is facing a job loss, and someone here is parenting a difficult teenager, and someone here is facing a health crisis, and someone here is without a partner and faces life alone, and someone here is worried about their relationship, and someone here doesn't even know where to turn, right? The need is great. And the fire of compassion that is underneath the cauldron of this community is what helps to transform lives and actually really save lives. It's not hyperbole. Lives have been saved. It takes courage to do this. It takes courage in ways that perhaps we didn't really think we had. But I see you doing it all the time. I see people doing uncomfortable things. I see people showing up for a group that they have no idea what it's about. I see people out on the streets, the No King's Day protest. I see people knocking on doors. As one sign said at the No King's protest, this has to be really bad for an introvert to be out here like this, right? Not all of us want to be out there. But some of us feel like we have to be out there. Because, friends, we want to move from being the wounded to being the wounded healers. We want to move away from just feeling the pain of the world around us or in our own personal lives and actually take that pain and be with others, right? That's what we need. But we need not be sanctimonious about this. This is an important point. The Franciscan monk Richard Rohr put it this way. He said, anyone who is morally outraged, and we should all be morally outraged about now, right? Takes the higher ground. But in so doing, you may be putting the rest down. So let's not be sanctimonious about the higher ground that we're on, because we're stumbling on the ground, no matter where we are. To be transformed is to admit that we are broken and that we are ready for love, and love sits at the center of our faith as Unitarian Universalists. Can you hear me now? Yes. This is where, as I said in Miller Williams' closing last week, this is where the spirit meets the bone. Where we don't know what's happening in people's lives, but you can bet that there's something happening. I've met many of you over the last few years that I've been here, and I've been always amazed and heartened at the spirit of faith you have in one another. A religion about people first, right? In her book, The Great Emergence, Phyllis Tickle says, we are on the edge of a great transformation, a global transformation. And of course, like all transformations, it has to get a lot worse before it gets better. In case you were wondering what's going on. That's what's going on. It's getting worse before it gets better. And that's the work that we're here to do. We're here to hold the wounds and hold those who need holding as we move through this transformation until we break through to the other side. And I absolutely believe we will break through to another side. And I love the diversity in here. You know, sitting in these chairs, we've got theists and agnostics and atheists and pagans and liberal Christians and Jews and Buddhists and the new hybrid Boo-Jewitarian, which somebody described to me the other day, and I thought, that's great, I love that. And sometimes we don't agree with one another. Some people say, hey, you know, I really don't, you know, you talked about the word God the other day. Freaked me out. Somebody said, well, you know, I don't think you talk about God enough. And some people don't like Christianity because they think it's all morally corrupt. And there's a big difference in Christianity, by the way. That's a big tent. You got people like Reverend Jim Wallace at the Sojourners, who's doing amazing work for peace and justice in the world. And then you got the Westboro Baptist Church. It's pretty sure that everyone in this room is going to hell. The point is that what makes us a people, what makes us a community, what is the cauldron of transformation, is that we learn to work alongside people who are different than us. There's a philosophy out there called agonistic respect. Agonistic respect, not agnostic respect. Agonistic as in agony. To be able to work alongside someone who has very different views than you. That's the agonistic part. The respect is you're still working alongside that person. And that's the work we're going to need to do. That's the work that will be about the symbols that change us from who we are. Commentators are saying it's less and less about the words we speak or the words we write. It's more about the images that we have, which is why there's a rainbow flag in front of this church. There's a rainbow flag when you walk in the front door. That's why you see images on a screen. That's why we see people coming in different ways. I'm very proud that on November 15th, Chester County PFLAG will be hosting a fundraiser here, and it's a drag show. A drag show in a Unitarian Universalist church. Yeah. Now we're on to something different. You hear what I'm saying? Let me close. It's a story I heard not long ago from a colleague of mine. He remembers being as a chaplain in a busy emergency room in Boston, as a matter of fact, and people in the different bays, and those places are crazy. If you even get inside, you're waiting for a doctor or a nurse. You've got this, you may not even have a gown on. I don't know what you have on, these little curtain cubicles, and you can hear people moaning and people, I need to see someone, and everyone's shouting, and it's terrible. And it's all this suffering around them. And then he said, until they brought this little boy in on a stretcher, code blue. And all these doctors and nurses just descended on that little body, trying to bring it back to life, to get him to breathe again. The parents are crying. All the rest of the room is quiet. The big emergency room quiet. And after trying so hard, they were unable to bring him back. The parents and his body were wheeled to another part of the hospital, and you could still hear the silence. And the chaplain said, I was in there, and this young doctor sort of kind of shook his head and went to the next bay where there was a woman who had been in a lot of pain, an older woman, and she looked at him and she said, you did all you could do. Why don't you take a few minutes before you see to me? That, friends, is space transformed through suffering to love. That's the cauldron of compassionate transformation. Little did I know as a boy I would spend the rest of my life being transformed by that experience in India. I have never returned to India, but in many ways I never left. What I believe I have now, with the many lives I think I still have yet to live, this one is the most important, and it should be, because it's the one I'm living. This work, this calling, this transformation, this leadership among you, people of leaders, this is the transformation we are about. These words from Joseph Campbell: when we quit thinking primarily about ourselves and our own self-preservation, we undergo a truly heroic transformation of consciousness. That's what we want to see, a heroic transformation of consciousness. So may it be, and amen.